Today on RPG Horror Stories, we have a story that was sent to me personally a while back. I'm sorry it took me almost a month to get to this OP, but I am finally here, so thank you for your patience. And this is going to be part one, because this is a really long story, but trust me, it is worth the read. Without further ado, let's get started. This story happened a few years ago on League nights at my local game store. As it was League play, we had many people come and go from the table, but there were 4 people who every week showed up, excluding the GM. Tom, a mighty dwarven barbarian who, though far from his people, held their honor with every step and protected the party to his last breath. Bray, his IRL girlfriend, a quiet elven ranger with a partner companion named Guinevere. Guinevere. And lastly was Larry, a halfling who could bend reality to his whim, and the most powerful of magic family bonds ran through his veins. I played a character concept I had a while in mind, more on her later. I had arrived early, and with the aid of the GM, I was making my character. While Tom and Bray had never played D&D before, they had watched every episode of Critical Role and were excited to play. Larry had played before, and he let us know it. I am, and was at the time, no stranger to gaming, having played for years. Larry had played 5e twice, thus making him an expert in all things 5th edition. This was my first time playing 5th edition, and truthfully, I didn't care. It's a game, not a competition, right? That was until he double-checked my character sheet, to make sure I was filling out my sheet right. As soon as he saw my class, he scoffed so loud, everyone in the basement of the gaming store looked over at our table. "You're playing a monk?" "Yeah." "Monk isn't a real class. D&D is a fantasy game. What does Key have to do with dragons?" "Haven't you ever heard of Journey to the West or the Monkey King?" "Those don't count. They are not Western. It's not real fantasy unless it has dragons." "Tell that to BioWare or Kurosawa." The GM finally looked up from helping the others across the table and said, "Monk is a basic class. OP can play it." "They're only a class because Gygax thought Bruce Lee movies were cool," he complained. "And they're not?" I shot back with a smile. Larry just sighed and continued to look over my character sheet. "You're a half-elf," he responded. "That's like the worst race for a monk." "I wanted the charisma bonus," I respond. "Charisma? You're a monk. You need dex and wisdom. If you're going to be a monk, you could at least be a good one. Look at this. Your background is entertainer. A good monk should be a sage or a hermit." This got the DM's attention. He looked over at my character sheet as I explained. Me, the character's name, was raised in a circus. That's why her skills are performance, sense motive, bluff, persuasion, all skills entertainers need to be effective in their trade. "If you're in a circus, how could you be a monk?" Larry shouted back. "Trapeze, tumbling, knife throwing, even clowning. There's a lot of opportunity to work on perfection of body as a physical performer. Then there's things like panhandling while the crowd is waiting to go on in. Things like calligraphy, painting, other stuff that brings the soul and body together. Besides, Way of the 4 Elements monk? Imagine doing trapeze while shooting fireballs. That would be awesome." Larry's eyes lit up hearing panhandling. What I meant was entertaining people waiting to enter into my circus in exchange for some coin and a hat. Larry heard something else. "If you're going to be a thief, why not play a rogue?" Smugly, looking as if he won some great battle over my character's class. He munched a Cheeto in celebration. "I would never demean my character's tribe like that," I answered him coldly, icily, that it caused him to stop his celebration mid-crunch. "My character's skills, my family's techniques, they're meant to entertain, to bring joy. A moment's respite from the reality of life. A moment of strength and laughter to those who have given up on it. We tell the stories of these long forgotten and sing songs of places that have never been. I'm a gypsy, a troubadour, not a thief, not a rogue, not a simple backstabber or muscle in a fight. I'm a diplomat, I'm a historian, a reason to smile in the rain. That's why I won't use my swords to kill." I'm going to be honest, I don't remember if those were the exact words I said. I doubt it, but they were close. I also know rogues are more than that, but it was pretty obvious that's all they were to Larry. These swords are family heirlooms. They're all meant to be part of a dance celebrating life. We perform it when someone is born, or a wedding, even a funeral. To use them to kill, that is the greatest perversion I can think of. I'll knock someone or something out, but I'll never use them to kill. Bray gave a smile and said, "That's cool." Larry wasn't as happy. Looked it over and then threw it at me, leaving a nice Cheeto fingerprint on the top of the page. "You're gonna die, and I'm gonna laugh." I guess Larry and I got off on the wrong foot. I know that this was a long intro, but hopefully interesting. I called Tom and Bray about some of the actual wording, and then onto the game itself. I won't go over a full list of Larry's particular playstyle, as it was over the course of a few months, but I will give you some of the highlights. During the first session, when he was asked to describe himself, he was wearing a dark cloak over dark clothing, sitting in the corner of the tavern, only his eyes visible under his dark mask, carefully studying everyone in the room, figuring out the best ways to kill everyone. He wouldn't even name his character. "You only call me by the screams of my enemies when I burn them alive." Every time we went shopping, he would sneak away and go, "Look at the most expensive and valuable thing I can find," and slip it into my cloak. He actually tried to kill a quest giver because he probably has the money on him. We can just kill him and take the gold without doing the quest. What does he matter anyway? He's just an NPC. At every town, he would look for a fighting pit or a mage to duel. When we faced a puzzle, his first action would be to hit it with a fire spell. When that didn't work, he would give up and say, "Obviously this is a waste of time, it doesn't have an answer. The GM is trying to trick us." It wasn't just NPCs that felt his edge, he also made his displeasure toward my character felt. The first night we were together, I mentioned I had 2 tents. "I'm not going to share a tent with me," Larry said loud enough that the table next to ours looked over. "Ew, why would I want to? You boys can have your own smelly tent. Bray and I can share if she wants." That night, I passed a note to the GM that caused dice to be rolled and a few more notes. When Larry saw this, he exploded. His character grabbed my bag and started to pour everything onto the ground. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I saw those notes. You stole something from Bray." "No, I didn't." "Sure you didn't. That's what we get for having a gypsy. All gypsies are thieves." Oh, Jesus. After a few seconds of looking, and it became apparent that me hadn't taken anything, he then said, "You planted something on her." She then looked through her bag, and sure enough, I had planted something on her. Those notes and rolls had been for the quality of charcoal drawing me had done of her the day before while riding, and slipping it into her bag while she was asleep. She thought it would be a nice surprise after a day of hard travel. Larry got mad and broke me's art supplies, saying, "That's just a waste of time." I asked her later, and Bray did say she liked it. Later, on another night, when it was me's turn to take watch, Larry woke her up by pouring water on her. He once went too far in combat and said he did not use any of his spells. Instead, he ran up to an opponent whose armor made him resistant to bludgeoning, and he said, "If me doesn't use her swords and kill him, I'm gonna die." Thankfully, Bray was there to kill the enemy with an arrow before me had to choose. What a hard choice that would have been. The worst event I can remember was in one of the first sessions. The party had gone to the fair, and there was some chicken running around. Tom blessed one, making it shiny. Me instantly fell in love with it and caught it. She named it Clutters, and it became her best friend. Think Mabel and Waddles from Gravity Falls. One day, Larry killed and ate... Clutters in front of me. When I complained, letting him know that it was crossing a line, all he said was, "Me won't do anything, she's too much of a priss." I began to notice that this was rubbing off on Tom. At first, he loved to roleplay, but as time went on, he became less and less involved. Bray and I would go shopping, and Larry would say, "I only take the things from those I kill." Suddenly, Tom refused to go shopping too. When Bray bought a treat for her companion, he berated her. "Why would you do that? It's only an animal companion." Bray and I went to the temple of his god to pray, asking if he wanted to join. He refused and said, "I think I'm going to go look for the fighter's pit." Larry was proud and clapped him on the back. Larry began making comments to Tom outside the game. At first, Tom and me had a bit of a strained relationship. Me was flighty, not idiotic or ADHD or flirty, but she liked to draw and to sing, to tell stories and to juggle. Tom didn't. His character was stoic, dignified, pragmatic. Despite me looking up to him as a big brother, little sister type of relationship, he just kind of tolerated her. It didn't take much for Larry to have an effect on this. I came in one day and heard Larry telling Tom, "Your paladin is getting powerful. It's too bad you have to babysit me every fight." Keep in mind, I'm still a level 5 monk at this point, put myself in the front lines of every fight. It was just instead of killing enemies, I knocked them out. Tom started complaining that me was weak and how he always had to protect her, so he wasn't getting all the kills he should have. I wasn't just in a group with one murder hobo and edgelord. I was watching the birth of another one. The worst part was that there was nothing I could do but wait. Thankfully, I didn't need to wait too long. We were on our way to Tom's home city for some R&R. His sister was getting married, and to me, that would mean one thing: party. Something I haven't mentioned was that Tom was deep into his character's family. He had a notebook from the first session detailing every member of his family, both close and extended. Along the way, Tom broke out that notebook and began to regale us with stories of his cousins and brothers. He told us how he couldn't wait to see his cousins or great uncle on his father's side twice removed again. The excitement in his eyes reminded me of his first few sessions, at least until Larry started wondering how much XP his grandfather cleric was worth. I remember seeing Tom just deflate, and neither Bree nor I could help find that excitement in him again. We arrived at the hall and found that it had been attacked. Many members of Tom's family had been slain, more taken prisoner. Those who remained told us how men wearing cloaks and armors of purple, each emblazoned with a holy symbol of fire, had attacked the hall, how their magics had destroyed their defenses, and how sharp their swords were. Even the temple that Tom had grown up in and listened to his grandfather's teachings, had heard his calling and became a paladin, lay in rubble, desecrated and unholied by the invaders' foul magic. Tom looked distraught. Bray rubbed him on his back. He was sitting there looking at his notebook. "Where's their gold?" Larry asked. "Where's their what?" the DM replied. "Well, if their guards are killed or taken prisoner, we can just grab their gold and no one's gonna stop us." I just shook my head as everyone stared at Larry, surprised. With how he had been acting all adventure, I wasn't shocked, but somehow they were. "There is no gold, dude. It has been taken," the GM said. "Well, I guess we need to go find them so we can get it." "And what are we going to do when we find them?" I asked him. "Attack them, obviously," he said, like it should have been obvious to everyone. In fairness, that was what I expected him to say. "Good idea. Attack what we have been told are hundreds of powerful enemies in an entrenched position. Let's see how that goes for you." "So what do we do then?" Tom asked, his first word since we got there. "How about you send me in?" I say. "What are you going to do? Sing for them?" Larry snickered. "Well, yes." He scoffed. "Sure, why not? You've been useless this entire game. Why not start being helpful now?" I ignored him and focused on Tom. This was his family after all, and he should have the final say. "Do you have family, allies, and friends in your journal?" "Yeah," he started. "Go get them, and be back in 3 days. I'll go in saying I'm an entertainer and here to entertain the soldiers. While I'm inside, I'll get information. Find out where they're located, how many there are, and where your family's being held, and come back with that knowledge. Meet me here," pointing to a place nearby. Tom let out a sigh. "I guess I'll go with you. Someone needs to keep the kid safe." He actually called me a kid. "And I'll start meeting with your family's allies," Bray offered. "What will you do?" the GM asked Larry. "I'll hit the fighting pits." "They've been destroyed. This city was just attacked," the GM replied. I admit I snickered a little bit. Rather than doing anything helpful such as rebuilding or going with Bray, he decided to do this. "I'll be sitting in a corner, judging how best to kill anyone I see." We moved on without him. Tom and I went on the hunt for any patrols, and within a few hours, we had found one. 2 men on horses, wearing heavy purple cloaks and great swords, flaming marks on their armors and cloaks. "Halt! Who goes there?" Tom started to prepare his weapon, when I stopped him. "I got this." Turning to the GM, I say, I put my hands up and pose. "I am Lady..." Seriously? That. "And this is my traveling companion. Tom, I believe you, my headstrong, handsome soldiers have caught us. I inform the soldiers that I am a traveling entertainer, and I have heard tale of great and powerful armies in the area, and I have decided to give them a free show. Like they're gonna fall for that. You're a monk, what are you gonna do, punch them? Larry sneered. No, I'll sing and dance and do some tumbling. I have the entertainer background, remember? We were level 5 or 6 at this point, so it had been a while since our first session. In his defense, he may have genuinely forgotten that. I say to the GM, these are men who have presumably been away from their homes for a while, judging by how this is the first time they've heard of the light, meaning there's a good chance it comes from a distant land. Also, they've also been through a lot of battles, which even victorious is a traumatic event. They could possibly use some actual entertainment for their morale, like a USO show. Well, that's BS, Larry cried out. Now, I know that the GM is a therapist, so he studied psychology. What I didn't know was that he was also a former Marine who served in the first days of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. After a moment's thought, he said, yeah, I could definitely see them doing that, provided you can give them a good enough of a show. They asked to see what you can do. Roll me a performance check. One roll later, Tom and I were brought to their camp, not as prisoners, but rather as guests. Unarmed and under constant watch, but guests all the same. The GM describes how over the next 3 days we are given the VIP treatment. Nice accommodations, good food, even fresh costumes and makeup and jewelry, which I later checked and found out was taken from Tom's family and that which wasn't mine, so I did my best to find the owners and return afterwards. I was doing 2 shows a day, each getting more and more of an audience and a larger venue to play in. At first a shack, but at the end a mess hall. A few of the soldiers even asked me to pose for paintings, which I happily signed for them afterwards. I won't lie, I was enjoying the attention both of the player and the character. This is what had built me for, after all, and I was actually being able to play her doing it. Great, you're in there, now what? It's not like you're just going to be able to walk around. This has been a complete waste of time. We should have just killed the dwarves while they were weak, taken their money and moved on. You're right, they won't let us rock around, nodding over to Tom, but I'm sure Pete and Sean, 2 random names for soldiers who have been guarding us, would be proud to show a beautiful half-elf on their arm, especially one who has been something of a celebrity around camp. And Tom, you're a fighter type. Why not ask to spar with them and get a feel for what kind of training they have and weapons to use? Pete and Sean, again those 2 random guards, were proud to show me off to everyone they could, and Tom could get a great workout with the soldiers of the light, even if they had to ask him to cool it down every now and then. My escorts and his sparring partners were more than happy to answer any questions they could. I learned about the layout of the camp, about their history, what the light was, customs, and all that good stuff. Tom learned about martial traditions, how they trained, some of the feats of skill, and as a dwarf, he was interested about the metal of their armors and weapons. This is where we broke for the week. Larry just packed up and left, while Tom, Bray, and I stayed after and started making plans. And that is where we are going to wrap it up for part 1. Now, before we completely end the video, I do want to give an analysis of what we have so far, because there is something I want to address. Often I see it said that problem players are justified because the OP, or the victim player in a sense, are doing something that certain players or DMs don't want in their games. For example, the character in this story does not kill people. I would probably advise against that in my own games. However, just because the OP is playing a character that I personally wouldn't want in my game, it doesn't justify Tom's response at all. Number 1, even if you disagree with the behavior of the OP in the story or the way they play their character, it's still their game. It is not our game. In my game, I would probably advise against a character who's a pacifist or a character who tries to be non-violent, just because there is a lot of violence in the games that I run. There's a lot of fighting. However, in someone else's game, with another DM who runs the game differently, that might be completely different. It's completely subjective the way people play characters. Quote-unquote errors like this are not really errors. They're just different styles of play. And even if it was something wrong, like spotlight hogging or a playstyle that's really, really, really bad for the game, even if that is the case, the response from Larry and the response from a lot of problem players I see on the subreddit to playstyles they don't like, their response is still not good. You don't have a discussion with someone by being an asshole, by being condescending. You don't fix anything. You don't make change. You don't make your game accepting and enjoyable by being a dick. That's not how it works. You're not going to have fun by being a dick. I don't understand how people think that that's going to happen. D&D is a cooperative game. If you treat it like a domineering competition, you're not going to have nearly as much fun. I don't understand what someone gets out of treating D&D like some kind of control freak operation. If someone has a playstyle that you disagree with, then have a discussion about it. Don't be like Larry. There's a couple things Larry does. He's also a complete edgelord and clearly some kind of min-maxer, so those things aren't awesome either, but we've already talked about that kind of behavior in other episodes of this series. But anyway, that is going to wrap it up for today. If you liked this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more episodes of RPG Horror Stories, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern for more of my content. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comment down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.